Hello and welcome to our humble little show. I'm Xander and this is Ashley.
Hello.
And today we're going to the land of great walls, air pollution, and pandas, the wonderful People's Republic of China. This video might be a little longer than the rest just because we're spending a lot of time here. So our stay in China was broken up into two parts. 3 days in Beijing, then off to Mongolia. After that was the big chunk in China. 8 more days in Beijing, 5 days in Xi'an, and 5 days in Chengdu. Then 4 days in Tibet, and finally 5 days in Shanghai. All in all, we'd be spending just under a month in China. Our flight was with ANA, and we were flying in economy. This was by far the best coach class flight I've flown. They had some pretty garbage seatback TVs, but it had a nose-wheel camera, which was really awesome. During our flight, we were served some pretty good food, and some Häagen-Dazs ice cream. Pretty cool for coach. In fact, I'd say it was on the same level as some business class flights I've flown on. Okay, back to the actual story. This was my first time in China, so all I knew about it was what I was told. Heavy pollution, people spitting and shoving, and pandas. Well, all that wasn't far from the truth. Yes, they might be a little exaggerated, but for the most part, they were spot on. Due to the ridiculous amounts of air pollution, we decided to stay in our hotel. I mean, Dad and I got upgraded to a suite, so it wasn't really that bad. For me, at least. I remember back in Japan when my dad got sick. Well, he was still sick, and he had a pretty nasty cough. He was coughing out blood and stuff like that. When he went to the hospital to see what's up, he realized he actually had pneumonia, so we didn't really do anything at all for our first 3 days in China. One thing I need to point out to anyone who might want to visit is the Great Firewall of China. A massive firewall that valiantly defends the innocent people of this country from harmful content. Basically all of Western media. YouTube, SoundCloud, Pinterest, Reddit, Flickr, Tumblr, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, and many more major media platforms are censored in this country. After those few days of doing nothing, we headed to Beijing's airport and ready for Mongolia. Let's get Mongolia real quick. We're back in Beijing and ready to start our actual section in China. Our hotel was a JW Marriott, one of the Marriott chain's higher level brands. The room was nice, the view nice on a clear day, but mostly not nice. It was time to visit the greatest wall in the world, and hey, it was a relatively clear day too. The drive took 2 hours from our hotel, although I got the back row of the van all to myself. Nowadays, only a select few sections of the wall are safe and open to the public, and those sections have to be constantly maintained from all the heavy foot traffic. We visited the fairly crowded Mutianyu section of the wall, where a ski lift took us up and a toboggan took us down. The section had 20 towers in it, with the parts to the left of the entrance built upon rolling hills and the ones to the right much steeper mountains. I really wanted to see tower number 20, as it was the highest in the section and we could see roped off abandoned parts of the wall. However, my mom and sister wanted to take the easier route, so we all headed left. On the other hills, we could see abandoned sections of the wall from a distance. Caved-in towers, broken down chunks of wall, and trees and plants growing from the deserted towers after centuries of neglect. After no change in the scenery whatsoever, we decided to head back to drop my mom and sister off at the entrance, where my dad and I embarked on the journey to Tower 20. With half an hour left, we made quick work of the first few parts, until it began getting progressively steeper, to a point where the steps looked more like a ladder than a staircase. Well, long story short, we ran out of time and had to turn back. Literally 1 tower away from 20. Overall, I think it was nice to see the wall in person and not in a postcard, and it was pretty fun climbing the steeper parts of the wall. The toboggan ride, on the other hand, was absolutely infuriating. We were stuck behind this guy in a business suit that was holding up the line of over 6 people all the way down the hill. We had to cruise at a painfully slow 5 miles per hour down the entire hill. Overall, amazing experience. Just hope you aren't behind a slow person. The tour guide we were with also took us to the Summer Palace and Beijing's Olympic Park. First off, the Summer Palace was pretty big, and it had this huge man-made lake. Like, huge. There was a temple overlooking the lake, and there was an island with another temple, although we only went to the island one. They were probably the same anyway. The UNESCO World Heritage Site is pretty big, although we only visited about a quarter of the attractions since we were short on time. Connecting the island to the land was a bridge, with 17 arches. Hence, it was creatively named the 17 Arches Bridge. After we visited that small portion of the Summer Palace, we drove over to Beijing's Olympic Green, which was where the 2008 Summer Olympics were hosted and the 2022 Winter Olympics will be hosted. The entire park consisted of a large man-made pond, the Beijing National Stadium, or the Bird's Nest, the National Aquatic Center, the National Indoor Stadium, and the Olympic Tower. We took an elevator all the way up the Olympic Tower, and the view was stunning. Well, it could have been much more if it wasn't for the smog on the horizon. That was it for our first day out.
Dad scheduled a sort of kung fu show for us to watch during the evening, so we checked out some nearby buildings and did some walking until the theater opened. The show was pretty cool, and there was a lot of flipping, breaking stuff, and just stuff you shouldn't try at home. It took about an hour, and after that we went to a nice restaurant for Peking duck. They served it on a porcelain duck, which was cute, but a little weird. Peking duck is from Beijing, although it's usually just called duck. It's well known for its crispy, shiny skin that peels off pretty easily. The first ducks used in this dish were small and dark-feathered, but now Peking duck is made with the white Peking duck. After the bird has been plucked and seasoned, air is pumped between its skin and flesh. Then the duck is cooked and the skin is brushed with sugar syrup. After the duck is finished, it's sliced into segments, each piece having a bit of crispy skin.
The next temple we visited in China was the Temple of Heaven. It was constructed in the 15th century and was built so emperors could pray to the heavens. Well, that wrapped up the first of many, many temples we visited. The second most overrated attraction in Beijing, the Forbidden City. Along with that, we also planned to visit Tiananmen Square and look at the buildings there. Numerous police buses with suspiciously tinted windows were stationed throughout the square itself, and lampposts were equipped with tons of cameras, speakers, and probably microphones too.
The Forbidden City served as an imperial palace from the Ming Dynasty to the end of the Qing Dynasty. And it's huge. It has 980 buildings covering roughly 180 acres with a total floor space of 1,600,000 square feet. That's almost 30 football fields. The palace also doubled as a fortress, with walls 26 feet high and a huge moat. Everything is super fancy and extravagant.
Overall, I think you're better off looking at it from a postcard or Google image with all those aerial photos and stuff. I wouldn't recommend the Forbidden City since essentially it's a crowded museum. The Great Wall, however, was amazing, especially where there are parts with no other tourists.
Dad and Mom went for massages one day while we stayed in the room. They thought we would like it, so they brought us to get foot massages. We were all put in the same room so Dad could translate everything, because the masseuses couldn't speak English and 2 out of 4 of us couldn't speak Mandarin.
What?
What'd she say? Our feet were soaked in scalding hot tea to sterilize them, and then the massage started. It was very relaxing, and after that they left us with the menu. Everything on it was included, so we ordered lunch for all of us. The food was surprisingly good.
Our next destination was Xi'an, famous for China's terracotta warriors. Now, we weren't flying there. We were traveling to Xi'an by train. Bullet train. The one we took had 16 cars in a 3-class layout, like airplanes. Anyways, we booked business class tickets and got the end of the train. Although we stopped at 2 stations, it only took us 4 hours to travel over 1,000 kilometers. We arrived late at our hotel. The rooms are nice, but the air conditioner in both of our rooms didn't work. We weren't complaining. After our first night, the lounge manager upgraded us to a suite. Not the presidential suite, but it was still pretty big. Now, the only reason why we were in Xi'an was for the Terracotta Warriors, which we visited the day after our arrival. The day we were planning to visit the Terracotta Warriors was unfortunately one of the most polluted in the week, so we decided to postpone it until the day after, hoping it would be better. For the time being, we went to a closer, metro-accessible attraction. It was basically like Pike's Place Market from Seattle, except all the shops were owned by Muslims and everything was pretty cheap. Hence, it was appropriately called the Muslim Quarter.
Muslim Street is a tourist attraction, and it's a great way to pass the time when you're bored. The streets are packed with small restaurants, markets, and stalls selling dried fruits, cakes, candies, spices, meat, and more. Don't forget the meat. There's a lot of it. I mean, this is China, the land where, if it's alive, people probably eat it. We wandered around for a few hours, visiting markets and picking up snacks as we went along. Xander got some grilled squid, which was messy and apparently not very good. There was also one of those really cool cotton candy vendors that made giant flowers. One of the things I was looking forward to was trying Dragon's Beard. You probably saw it floating around the internet a while ago, but if you haven't, Dragon's Beard is a hand-pulled candy that resembles the cotton candy we have here, but more like hair, hence the dragon's beard. It's made by boiling sugar syrup, then letting it cool into a solid but slightly flexible disc. A large hole is poked into the center, and then it's stretched into a ring, then twisted in half and stretched out again until the strands are paper thin. I tried some, and it's really messy. It melts in your mouth and gets flour absolutely everywhere. On our way back to the hotel, we stopped by this row of people selling stuff and were intrigued by these toys that looked like sticky orbs that you could just chuck into the ground and it goes. I got an egg and Xander got an angry bird. But the silicone on his was thinner, so when he threw it, it would basically explode.
The weather had cleared up the next day, and it was time to visit the Terracotta Warriors, about an hour's ride from our hotel.
The Terracotta Warriors were discovered in 1974 by a farmer who was trying to dig a well. Imagine just trying to dig a well for some water, and then you stumble across a giant army of clay people. That must have been an interesting day. There are a few main pits that house the army, consisting of over 8,000 soldiers and a lot of horses. It was all built for the first emperor of China. Long story short, he wanted to become immortal, and in doing that, poisoned himself. Yeah, it turns out ingesting large amounts of mercury isn't great for the pores. The emperor figured that when he died, the Terracotta Army would protect and preserve his power when he went to the afterlife. Craftsmen worked on the project for what historians think to be about 40 years. The soldiers have a surprising amount of detail. They were painted, had facial hair, weapons, and clothes.
So that was it for the Terracotta Warriors. It was cool to see, but we probably won't be coming back again. Now again, we had much more planned in Xi'an, but the air pollution just kept on getting worse. So we had to spend more and more time in our spacey suite of ours. It was time once again to hop cities, this time to Chengdu. We took the high-speed rail again. This time the train was split into 2 pairs of 8-car train sets. The tickets for business class were less pricey as Beijing to Xi'an, and we didn't know what to expect. Well, the cabin was just as nice, and on top of that, we were the only ones in the business class cabin. We had it all to ourselves. It was like a private jet, but on rails. 10 minutes into our ride, we finally realized why the tickets were so cheap. We stopped at over 8 stations, and it took the same amount of time as the first train to cover less than half the distance. The main reason we were in Chengdu, despite the horrible air quality, was to see some pandas. Anything else was a bonus. We were trying to time our excursion with the least polluted day, although conditions never got better. In fact, they were getting worse with every day, so we opted to visit them as soon as possible. We were originally planning to visit a panda place pretty far away from the city, but that was way too far away, so instead we went to the Chengdu research base of giant panda breeding. Essentially, it was just a zoo, but it only had pandas.
Our driver dropped us off, Dad got tickets, la-di-da, and now we're in the base. As we walked along the path, we heard them. The horde. We walked a little faster, hoping it would give us a longer head start to admire the pandas in quiet. It got harder the further we went because there were already so much people and they all squeezed together into a huge impenetrable mass. This was the first time Xander and I had seen red pandas and giant pandas in person, so that was fun. The pandas mostly just lazed around and ate, which is basically what they spend their whole life doing, so yeah. The giant panda is a bear species native to central China. They roam the bamboo forests in the mountains. You probably already know this, but I'm saying it anyway. Pandas were made to be carnivores, but they decided to almost become vegetarians for some reason. They still eat meat every once in a while, but their diet is about 99% bamboo, which has an extremely low nutritional value. This is why pandas spend most of their time either eating or sleeping. They have to eat about 30 pounds just to stay alive. It's hard work. When people discovered the majestic panda, they did what anyone would do. Capture them, study them, turn them into novelty items, and hand them out as gifts. Yep. Humans at their finest. Once pandas started getting harder to find, they stopped shortly after, but the damage was already done. The panda population dropped pretty dangerously, so breeding and captivity centers were created to protect the pandas they already had. After a lot of hard work and care, giant pandas got bumped down from endangered to vulnerable on the conservation status. After panda sightseeing, we decided to check out the gift shop. It had a lot of panda-related items, as expected. We didn't get anything because they were really expensive, so we got a ride back to the hotel.
After we visited the pandas, we really didn't know what else to do. We were just killing time at this point, so my dad decided to take us to this place called the Wide and Narrow Alleys, an outdoor, antique-looking shopping street similar to Xi'an's Muslim Street.
The wide and narrow alleys are a cultural and historical area designed during the Qing dynasty. We did the same thing that we did in Muslim Street, wander around, check out things that looked interesting. The weather was quite cool, and this place wasn't so hustly, so that made it more enjoyable. We came across this lady who was making really cool inflatable animal lollipops. She made a little lump out of hot moldable candy, then shaped part of it into a straw. She molded it into an animal with the help of the customer, who gently blew into the straw and inflated it. Then the finishing touches, the stick, some paint, and some final details were added, and then it was popped into a bag. And this was all in about 3 minutes or less. I got a rooster, though I felt a little bad eating it. Eventually, Mum was lured into a tea house, and we ended up having someone serve us tea in a very ceremonial fashion. She poured some diluted-looking tea into our tiny, tiny cups, and then did that. It was apparently to sterilize and warm the cups. She spilled water all over the tray in the process, which was a little weird for us to watch, especially after Japan, where the whole point was to be precise and not spill a drop.
So overall, the wide and narrow alleys was a tourist attraction. That's all it was. The best part for me was when we came across a gelato shop, and I got to have ice cream. The rest was navigating aimlessly through crowds of tourists. Our time in Chengdu was over, and now it was time to head to Lhasa, Tibet. There was a lot of talk about Lhasa, since I have minor breathing problems, and Tibet, also known as the ceiling of the earth, has an average elevation of 15,000 feet. Also, since Tibet was taken by force by the Chinese in the 1950s and is an occupied country, the Chinese government is really touchy about what you say and do there. And in order to even visit it, you need to sign several papers. We flew from Chengdu on an Air China A319, and we were served lunch on board. Pretty unexpected since it was only a 2-hour flight. Lhasa's Gongar Airport only has one runway, and it's pretty long. For comparison, all of Seattle Tacoma's, Beijing's, and Miami's runways are shorter than Lhasa's. For bigger planes to take off in the thin Tibetan air, they need more speed to generate enough lift to get airborne, so they need a longer runway, which is why such a small airport has one longer than a lot of international airports. We spent the first day chilling in our hotel to acclimatize to the thin air. The next day, we went to the Summer Palace and Barkor Square, with our wonderful tour guide, Serena. The next day, we went to the square, which was a large plaza that has been the center of several violent political protests. There are security checkpoints that border the square, as well as an endless amount of cameras. Along with their avid surveillance equipment, guards armed with rifles and heavy riot shields, possibly from the People's Liberation Army, and several armored vehicles equipped with gas canister launchers were parked on the street. This is an occupation, after all. A lot of Tibetans were praying, though their version of praying is a lot more active than any other I've seen. It looks almost like a workout. Most people did it in one spot, but others slowly inched forward, circling around the square. It looks really tiring, and they just keep doing it for who knows how long.
After some more walking, Serena took us to a tea house, although it was nothing like we'd been to before. She bought some glass cups and told us to find a place to sit. A lady came, and we paid her to fill our cups with milk tea? It tastes almost exactly the same as the milk tea we had in Mongolia. In fact, Tibet reminded me a bit of Mongolia with their milk tea and use of mutton for everything. Anyway, after we finished our drinks, we left and took a rickshaw to the Summer Palace.
The Summer Palace, also known as the People's Park and what's called Norbulinka, was originally used by the Dalai Lamas in the summer, because rich people need more than one home, right? Now, Dalai Lamas were basically the rulers of Tibet. Tibet was one of those countries where religion and government were intertwined, so Dalai Lamas were the head of church and state, so that made them pretty powerful and rich. Like most other palaces, the Summer Palace is surrounded by a large swath of land. The palace itself was just a palace, built in the 18th century under the 8th Dalai Lama, and has been upgraded over the years, up until the present Dalai Lama had to flee from Tibet when the Chinese invaded. After we were done exploring, we stopped for lunch in a little restaurant. I ordered yak steak, which was this piece of cardboard stuck to my plate. The sauce was pretty good, though. After lunch, we returned to our cozy little hotel room and rested for the rest of the day. Now, for the only thing I knew we were going to do in Tibet, we were going to the Potala Palace.
The Potala Palace is a sacred group of religious buildings that was turned into a museum and World Heritage Site. Over the years, it separately housed several Dalai Lamas. It was built in 1649, which is not too long after the Great Wall was constructed. The Potala Palace is split into two main parts: the White Palace, the residence of the Dalai Lama and the Tibetan government, and the Red Palace, home to chapels, sacred things, and the tombs of the Dalai Lamas, There's some moderate security around the area. They have strict security checkpoints, so no water, and to our dismay, no oxygen tanks. If you didn't already realize, a lot of stairs plus low oxygen isn't really best for newcomers. I thought that we were just going to the top and coming down, but Serena took us inside to see everything. That delayed us for another hour or two, but after that we finally got to leave and rest because we were all pretty tired.
Honestly, Tibet wasn't the best for me. Well, I mean, especially since we're Asian and Tibet is occupied by China, we get a lot of funny looks from the locals there. The flight back to Chengdu was on an Air China A330-200, and we were served lunch again. We then had to wait at the airport for a few hours before hopping onto another plane to our next destination, Shanghai. Our hotel was a JW Marriott, just a few miles away from the city center. There was no subway station easily accessible, but that didn't really matter since the only place we had planned was the city center. Like our hotels in Beijing and Chengdu, there is a fairly large shopping center right next to our hotel, so we never needed to venture far in the smog. Oh yeah, the smog was terrible in Shanghai. For the first 2 days it was relatively clear, although my dad was working so we never left the hotel. Then, on day 3, the smog rolled in, and it was bad. That's when we decided to go visit downtown Shanghai. We took a cab to the Bund, the waterfront area just across from Shanghai's commercial district. Shanghai's skyline is one of the most recognizable in the world, with the Pearl Tower, the Shanghai World Finance Center, and the Shanghai Tower being the most prominent buildings on the peninsula.
The Bund is a waterfront tourist attraction located along the Huangpu River. Right across from it are a few of Shanghai's landmarks, although they're hard to see in smoggy days. When the sun sets, the buildings are lit up and do a little wave up and down the waterfront, so that was a plus. We didn't really do much after that.
After spending over a month in the People's Republic of China, we finally left for Japan. And that wraps up China. It was nice to go to a country with a smaller language barrier and with foods we were a little more familiar with.
Even though China was fun, it was kind of a relief to leave the pollution, spitting, squat toilets, and firewall behind. Especially the firewall.
Anyways, thanks for watching and we'll see you later.
Bye!